This is Command Post, a series of discussions about military matters from Time and the Center for a New American Security.
Jim, who are the cyber warriors we most need to fear? Is it kids in the basement, non-state terror actors, or states? And what's to prevent states from contracting out their cyber terrorism to non-state actors?
The kids get a lot of attention, but they really aren't that good, right? And so they're getting a lot of airtime, but they're not a big threat. The real threats are states, right? And states, in particular two states, Russia and China, use proxy forces, which is to say hackers who live in those countries and act as agents for the government and get support, get training, get financing, right? Those are our biggest threats. And against them, we are very ill-prepared to defend ourselves. Over time, what I think a lot of us worry about is that the capabilities that the states and their proxies have now will flow to other groups, will flow to the Hezbollahs or the Hamases of the world. And one of the signs for me that the states have such tight control over their proxies is you don't see Russian mercenaries going and working for Hezbollah. You don't see Chinese hackers working. These countries don't like jihad any more than we do, and they're not going to let their proxies go and help those guys. When that changes, we could be in for some trouble. But right now, states are the main threat.
Kristin, do you agree with that?
I agree with Jim exactly that states are the main threat today, but in the future, and maybe it's not such a far away future, the problem is that we may see a cyber arms market arise where the most malicious actors can simply purchase the most sophisticated capabilities, and it's that marriage down the line that I think we need to be most concerned about, because that will mean that you don't need to have a state in order to launch a powerful attack. You therefore don't have the tools and the deterrent mechanisms you have against the state, and that's something that will be much harder for us to respond to.
But are these capabilities one size fits all, or do they have to be configured against a particular threat? Does it take a certain degree of knowledge of what it is you're attacking in order to be effective?
Ultimately, these weapons come from the minds of people, and therefore humans can tailor these weapons for specific purposes. And so it's just like hiring a consultant to design any other kind of weapon, except the cost of developing the weapon is much, much lower in the case of cyber attacks than it is in the case of conventional weapons.
Jim, you talked about how Russia and China employ proxies. You asserted that. Is that something the U.S. government knows? Is that something the U.S. government believes? Or is it just a hunch in think tanks?
No, it's something the U.S. government knows and believes. And one of the problems is we don't have a good way to engage with other countries to talk about cybersecurity. And for a long time, in the Clinton administration, we pretended it wasn't a problem. In the Bush administration, we pretended it wasn't a problem. This administration, to their credit, has begun to talk to Russia and China to say, we have a mutual problem, how do we deal with it? But right now there's not a lot of leverage there. I mean, if you're the Russian government and you tolerate hackers because you might find them politically useful, what are we going to do about it? And the answer is not a heck of a lot. So we need new tools to put pressure on other governments to behave. By the way, they would say the same thing about us. They would say, you Americans are tromping all over our networks and we don't trust your suppliers for a minute. How do we get you under control? I actually kind of like that, because when both sides have a shared fear, there's room for negotiation.
Will there need to be an arms control pact for cyber conflict? Just as, you know, we have missile non-proliferation regimes, we have nuclear non-proliferation regimes. Is this some sort of a framework we need in this cyber realm?
It would be extremely helpful to have some rules of the road or some kind of agreements, because this is a very escalatory arena. There's a lot of pressure for both sides to build up some very dangerous capabilities. The problem is with verification. Back in the Cold War, one of the things that made arms control agreements possible, even with our most devoted enemies, was that we could send satellites up into the air, count how many tanks, count how many missiles, and we had a fair amount of confidence in those estimates and had a fair amount of confidence in our understanding of how much damage could be done. That transparency does not exist in cyberspace. That kind of quantification does not exist in cyberspace, and that makes verification hard, and that makes arms controls agreements hard.
No treaties, please. Treaties just don't make any sense. What would you agree to? We can't even define what a cyber weapon is, right? And the verification problem is very real. So what you have to get is something more like understandings, norms that say, this is how grown-up responsible states act. And then when you see somebody acting outside that norm, you can go and chastise them. It's our failure to chastise anybody for being bad that's helped put us in the mess we're in now.